So, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So we'll pick up where we left off last time, which is we're going to read the last story in the introduction. An introduction, or the foreword of the book. Okay, so Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, the last of the divinely guided caliphs, the Lion of Allah. So one of the nicknames of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu was the Lion of Allah, the Asadullah. The symbol of knowledge, generosity, and loyalty, the father of the grandchildren of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was also known as the invincible warrior of his time. In one battle, he had overpowered an enemy warrior and had his dagger at the man's throat, when a non-believer spat in his face. Immediately, Sayyidina Ali got up, sheathed his dagger, and told the man, taking your life is unlawful to me, go away. The man who had saved his life by spitting in the face of the revered Lion of Allah was amazed. He said, O Ali, I was helpless. You were about to kill me. I insulted you and you released me. Why? When you spat in my face, Hazrat Ali answered, it aroused the anger of my ego. Had I killed you then, it would not have been for the sake of Allah, but for the sake of my ego. I would have been a murderer. You are free to go. The enemy warrior, moved by the integrity displayed by Sayyidina Ali, converted to Islam on the spot.
Oh my gosh.
So, this is a really famous story about Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu. There are actually a lot of stories about his battles, or his ability, like his ability in battle. He was known as like one of the greatest warriors, and you can look up some of like the historical like stories, but he used to be able to engage like multiple people at a time. He used a double-edged sword. Zulfiqar was one of the swords of the Prophet.
I thought you were talking about Hazrat Ali first.
Yeah.
Didn't he have Zulfiqar was the name of his sword?
Was the name of his sword as well? There was a sword that was Zulfiqar that was the name of one of the swords of the Prophet Muhammad. I'm not sure about the names of the swords of Sayyidina Ali. But one of his swords was a double-bladed sword.
There are two separate blades.
It it didn't like go out and curve, but it was kind of like
a forked.
It was kind of like a forked.
Interesting.
So it could like grab a blade in between its two
blades,
right?
So it's like a fork.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's more difficult to maneuver and wield.
Precision, right?
But even with that, there would be times where he would, during battle, he would run circles around like certain enemies, and then he would advise other fellow soldiers on like attack like this, attack like this, attack like this, in the midst of battle, right? He was just like he was given just like certain like miraculous sorts of like abilities. But we can see specifically here, right, that he was at the point where he was able to completely take down his enemy, right? Or he had already taken down his enemy. He was able to kill him. But in that instant, right, the man spat in his face. And he was able to withhold himself, right? He was able to, even in that, like, in the midst of, like, passion, right, where no one would be able to tell, no one, aside from himself and Allah, would be able to tell why, or like what the motive or what the intention would be for him to finish off his enemy. He understood in that instant, right, that like, imagine like the blade of the dagger is at the enemy's throat, and at that instant you get spat in the face. That would entice, like a normal person, that would entice you more, just like push, right? But in that instant, Sayyidina Ali realized that like, if I continue, then I'm going to do it out of like, I'm going to do it out of like some sort of vengefulness. So he knew that it would no longer be, it was no longer sincere. So he stopped himself, right? That's also emblematic and symbolic of chivalry, because you're able to recognize, when a person is able to recognize in the midst of a very, very difficult situation, what is the higher path, right? And able to like restrain himself, having that sort of discipline. It doesn't mean that like, there's also kind of a misconception about like the tasawwuf and like taming one's soul and one's desires, and that like one should be able to completely eviscerate them, right, and demolish them such that like one doesn't have any sorts of like. I remember a couple of weeks ago we talked about like the angelic qualities and like the bestial qualities, right? So there are certain desires that people have that are like very angelic, very like high sorts of desires, and then there are other sorts of desires that human beings are given that are like very base carnal desires that every single person has: eating and drinking and wanting to see like beautiful things and like intimacy and that sort of stuff, right? And even like anger and love and all these sorts of things that can have physical manifestations. There are, in certain things, there are not necessarily like natural problems in them, right? But if they're left unchecked, they can become problematic. The person who's really practicing tasawwuf and taming himself is that person who's able to have those, but keep them in check.
It's like they go away, because it's like a part of being human.
Yeah, because if they went away, like if people say that like every single person is given like a different amount, is disposed with a different amount, right? Like certain people like to eat more than other people, right? But you could have a huge appetite, but you can work on training yourself to like limit your appetite.
Yeah.
Right. That doesn't mean your appetite goes away. That means that you just like
you just don't act on it.
You don't
right?
act on it, right? Because you have that discipline, right? There's that kindergarten cop. I love finding this GIF, this GIF or this clip from kindergarten.
Kindergarten cop.
Yeah, with Arnold Schwarzenegger when he's like talking to a bunch of second graders. They're all like complaining. Yeah, they're kindergartners, and he's like, "You lack discipline. Quit whining. No more bathroom breaks for you." He's talking to like a bunch of little kids, right? But that's something that like humanity now, we just lack discipline. People kind of they eat however much they want. They never get satisfied with that. They have as much sex as they want. They don't get nothing is left in check, right?
People just do whatever they want, and then they're just like whatever.
And then it's all concerned about themselves, right? Like, when am I going to get mine? I need to make more money, regardless of whether or not the person next to me is like starving, right? I don't care, because it's all about me, because I don't have enough, right? There are a lot of other hadith. I wanted to actually get into like the crux of the book. So in another of the battles against the unfaithful, Sayyidina Ali encountered a handsome young warrior who moved to attack him. His heart filled with pity and compassion for the misguided youth. He cried out, "O young man, do you not know who I am? I am Ali the Invincible. No one can escape from my sword. Go and save yourself." The young man continued toward him, sword in hand. "Why do you wish to attack me?" Ali said. "Why do you wish to die?" The young man said, "I love a girl who vowed to be mine if I killed you." "But what if you die?" Sayyidina Ali asked. "What is better than dying for the one I love?" He replied. "At worst, would I not be relieved of the agonies of love?" Hearing this, Sayyidina Ali dropped his sword, took off his helmet, and stretched his neck like a sacrificial lamb. Confronted by such an action, the love in the young man's heart was transformed into love for Ali and the one whom Ali loved, meaning Allah. So, I don't know, how about you guys think about,
like, the moral of the story?
Yeah, or maybe like one thing that we can extract from that.
I don't know, do acts of pity for others, I guess.
I think it's more about like respecting, like I feel like, I mean, like, I don't know how it was interpreted that like the fact that like he wanted to be free from the agonies of love, But I think it's interesting that like it was like literally just a respect for the love that he had, in my opinion. That's what it seemed like to me.
Because
Because
it seemed like
Ali's also fighting for like Allah, right?
Yeah.
Which is like all about like how much you love God. So if like, and that's what I just saw the similarity in like the thought processes.
that's the same thing that I took from it, in that because Sayyidina Ali recognized like
The genuine love.
the genuine love, right? Then he understood like why the person was fighting. Right?
Exactly.
And if Sayyidina Ali is going to pass away in battle, right? We talked about this last week about like if a Muslim dies on the battlefield, that's martyrdom, that's shahada, that's straight to Jannah, right? So it wasn't like Sayyidina Ali was
like
losing.
sacrificed himself, so isn't that like in some way? Like, I don't know if I'm wrong, but isn't it like suicide in a way because you're just like letting your enemy kill you?
I think maybe this
I
ties.
don't know.
No. I mean, because like on a literal level, like
Mhm.
I think that this ties back to what we were talking about with like the emotional weight in words and not, or like the metaphysical portion. So it's like literally just based on like what if anyone saw it, like he was being suicidal. But I think it comes like with Islam, like it's a lot about the intent,
Okay.
and it's a lot about the thought process and the reasoning, and as long as that's genuine.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know the specifics, but it would seem to me that this story is conveying the fact that Ali felt like, or he probably believed that like if he loves and I love and like we're fighting, then it's almost like there's nothing to do. Like if they were both gonna fight and kill each other, then it's like that's useless. Like two people don't need to die.
That could be.
Yeah, it could be. Like I'm just trying to extrapolate.
But it could also be that Sayyidina Ali, radiallahu anhu, he recognized that like
The love
okay,
could be conquered like with his action of like
Yeah.
offering
Okay,
himself.
okay.
Yeah.
that like such an outpouring of like his genuine love, right?
Like stopped him.
But at the same time, like you don't want to like risk that, But I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
what if,
understand where you're coming from.
what if like
Because if it was me, I would not do that on the battlefield.
what if Ali was asked like when he came over here when the guy came over to kill Ali, he was like, and then Ali asked him like, what if you died? You know what I mean? So I feel like if Ali was asked that question, he would just tell then the answer would be like, because I knew that my action would stop him.
Okay.
But I feel like that's where it gets drawn back to. It's the fact that the knowledge was there that it wouldn't happen, which comes from the fact that, this divine influence. But I do have to leave now.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Because it's 7.
Yeah.
I appreciated the talk earlier, and I like this, that you were doing this.
Yeah.
Do you do it every Thursday
Every Thursday.
at this time?
Yeah, so next week, I guess what we'll do, since small group comes in a little bit earlier, if you get here on time, we'll pray at like 6:15, just start right then, so we can
Cool.
go for a whole 45 minutes until 7 o'clock, because
Cool.
we'll stop at 7.
Yeah.
Usually we stop like before 7 anyways, but now since we can move later, we'll go for like maybe another 10 minutes.
Yeah,
You can catch up the rest of the recording.
of course. I'll try my best to be here next week, because usually I'm free around this time, and I'll bring my book next time. So I'll have to take it
Yeah,
later.
and if you want to come to the pizza thing, you are mad.
No, I'm leaving. I'm going
Oh.
on campus. Yeah, that's
Oh.
why. Yeah.
Well, you're welcome to come back
Of course.
every Thursday.
All right, thank
Are
you.
you on? Did you get the
Nice to
email?
meet you. I got the email from the Glabin because I'm on the Glabin side.
Oh.
I can give you my email really quickly because I don't get any of that.
Yeah. Wait, are you in the WhatsApp? Are you in the WhatsApp group?
No, I'm in nothing.
Okay, let me just take down your email.
What was your name again?
Yeah.
Ilyas Ramir.
Me?
Yeah.
You a student?
I'm a junior. I'm an undergraduate.
Okay.
What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a freshman.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. Where are you from?
Boston.
Cool. I'm from Jersey.
Right.
Jersey gang.
Jersey's a really nice place.
It depends on where in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Okay, so
RKESH
Kekesh.
WANI 1 at Babson.
Okay. RKESHWANI
Yeah.
1.
Yeah.
Not Babson.
And my first name is Rumir. RUMEER.
RUME.
Yeah, 2 E's.
Okay, cool. I'll let you listen then.
Just shoot me an email or whatever.
Alright.
I do have WhatsApp, but
I can, yeah, I'll send you the link to join the WhatsApp group.
Okay.
Alright? Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.
Walaikum salam. Okay. Should we continue for another 10
Yeah,
15
yeah.
minutes? Okay. I'm also gonna turn this way. Yeah, that's a little better. Because I'm experimenting with this, and then
Yeah.
people will always be like, your camera angle is so bad. I don't really care about that. It's just, okay. So then the last couple of paragraphs of the foreword talk about the author and like the rest of like the introduction to the book. So the author is Ibn Hussein as-Sunami.
Okay.
So it says, already during Sunami's lifetime, the principles of brotherhood, loyalty, love, and honor derived from the code of Sufi chivalry had begun to produce a distinct class of people with special social responsibilities. Later, during the reign of the Khalifa, Caliph Nasruddin Allah, the rank of Futua was accorded to worthy princes and dignitaries. Such men were ceremonially dressed in special vestments and made to drink from the cup of knighthood. The images of the cup and the vestment appeared on their coat of arms. The oaths that they swore were unconditionally respected. In Syria, the members of this brotherhood were responsible for the rebellion against the heretical Rafidites, the Rawafid. In Asia Minor, the brotherhood developed into fraternal communities whose members lived in convents under the guidance of a sheikh, and often all worked at the same trade. The clothing that distinguished them consisted of a cloak, a white woolen cap, and shoes particular to them, and each wore a knife in his belt. It is reported that they were hospitable to travelers and ruthless toward tyrannical rulers. Futuwa later became one of the essential elements in the Islamic guilds. The rules of conduct and virtues presented in The Way of Sufi Chivalry illuminate the way to the total assimilation of Sufism by experiencing it and living it. This code of honor leads to a state of total consciousness of truth, not by hearing it or by seeing it, but by being it. This is the book of Adab, perfect behavior, modeled after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Sufis see Adab as an act of continuous devotion, or continuous act. Okay, so we have a couple options. We can pause there, or we can start part one. Like instead of going into the introduction. The introduction talks a
So
little
we're
more about
only at the
Futuwa.
forward the whole entire
We
time.
just did the forward. A couple of the stories were from the forward.
Okay.
So
The story's like very long. We could stop because we do want to like do anything. Like,
we do want to,
introductions.
yeah. But I want to read just a couple of derivations of the word Futuwa.
Okay.
Okay. Because this goes through a couple of the like the paths, the couple of like the orders of Futuwa. But I want to just read one paragraph from this page, which is about the word Futuwa itself. So, the word Futuwa is not found in the Arabic language at the beginning of Islam. However, it is derived from a very ancient word, fata, which we talked about before, whose basic meaning is young man, a shab, one who, though having reached adulthood, has not yet arrived at maturity, traditionally achieved at age 40. So the Arabs have like different names for the levels of reaching like different levels of maturity, right?
It's like the Romans basically.
Yeah, so like you have like ghulam, which is like a young boy, right? And shab. Shab goes up to the age of 40, at which time someone becomes a rajul. Right? So
So
rajul
at 40, he becomes a man.
40. The way that the Arabs they would give the word rajul at 40, rajul coming from the word rijal of like legs,
Yeah.
people who are able to stand on their own 2 feet.
Okay.
Right, so someone is known as a youth up until the age of 40. All of the people of the upper class circle of Quraysh, like the the council of elders. Those are all people who are 40 years old or older, 40 years of age or older. And fata is young person, right? So, like in Surah Al-Kahf, إِذْ أَوَى الْفِتْيَةُ إِلَى الْكَهْفِ, right? That there are young people like that took refuge in a cave. So the exact age isn't known, but like could be teens to 20s, someone who's known as like a young person. So Ashab is one, though having reached Sofata, whose basic meaning is young man, Ashab, who, though having reached adulthood, has not yet arrived at maturity, traditionally achieved at age 40, which is the time of plenitude, but also the beginning of decline. This meaning of fata includes a heroic connotation that has become inseparable from the term futuwa. The ideal fata was exemplified by Ali, radiallahu anhu, the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is characterized by selflessness, courage, generosity, and honor. So what I want to do is skip this and read this. Along the path that leads to this end, the fata must first learn not to love his ego. And that is why in the course of his novitiate, the Shaykh teaches him to love others before himself and God above all. But once the goal has been attained, he discovers that the secret of his apprenticeship is that he has no ego, and what he has loved was but a dream. The idol has referred it to nothingness, both self and others cease to exist. For him, the trials of spiritual combat have now become like the furnace to Ibrahim alayhi salam, refreshment and peace. So we'll read a little bit from the beginning. We'll go for another 5 minutes, because that's basically the crux of the introduction.
Okay.
So part 1. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa alayhi tawakkalna. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate and the Merciful, on whom we depend. All praise is due to Allah, who has opened the path of futuwa, which leads to the most beautiful form of the fulfillment of our duties to Him, and who has cleared and cleansed that path from all errors and all evil, and raised its level to the highest. The prophets whom He has sent, and the chosen servants who are close to Him are on this path. Although for all for whom the path to truth has been opened, and whose names are written as pure in the book of righteousness, learn to follow this path and attain the noble levels of those who embody futuwa. The first to follow the call of futuwa, to honor magnificence and good conduct, was Adam, whose name is fixed in the will of Allah, Adam alayhi salam, whose being lives in the house of majesty, who is supported by the holy light and purity, and who has been crowned by the crown of munificence and entered into the realm of salvation. When his son Cain renounced futuwa, his other son Abel took it up. The prophet Seth, or Sheath, right, gave futuwa its due and protected it from all and everything that was improper. The prophet Enoch was brought to high stations. You know who Enoch is?
Yeah.
Idris,
Yeah.
alayhi salam. The prophet Idris was brought to high stations by it and was saved from the traps of the devil. Noah suffered from his devotion to futuwa and thus became illuminated by it. It's really interesting, right, the way he says that he suffered for his devotion to futuwa, but then became illuminated by it. So he suffered for 950 years, right, treading in the path, but his end was a glorious end. Right? Aid was named after futuwa, which protected him from pride. Hud showed the beauty of loyalty to his people with futuwa, and Salih saved himself from evil with its help. Abraham, the friend of Allah, who was a true fata, broke the statues and idols. Through futuwa, Ishmael was ready to be sacrificed to his Lord Most High, and Lut reached the high heaven from which there is no descent. With futuwa, Ishaq, Isaac prays until the day of reckoning. Yaqub, Jacob held fast to the ideals of Futuwa. In Futuwa, Ayub, Job, found comfort in his sickness. With Futuwa, Joseph, trod the most beautiful of paths and succeeded at each step. Dhul Kifl, abiding with the high ranks of Futuwa, did his good deeds. Shu'aib alayhi salam, taking the laurels in the race, won the first place. With Futuwa, he kept from all doubt and error. Musa alayhi salam, was honored by being invested with the robe of Futuwa. Harun alayhi salam abode with it and spoke well. The companions of the cave and the inscription were honored by it and were saved and entered into the realm of God's gifts. Dawood's heart alayhi salam was revived with it, and because of it he found it sweet to bow and prostrate. Sulaiman alayhi salam received Futuwa from Dawood, his father. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Both men and jinn came to be under his command on its account. Jonah, Yunus alayhi salam, saw reality in the rules of Futuwa and he followed them. Zakaria entered the realm of peace and joy with it. John, Yahya, with his loyalty to it in difficult matters, was saved from the pangs of suffering. Isa alayhi salam shone with the purest of light through it and came to be called the Spirit and the Messiah through it. Entire victory was given to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the brothers Abu Bakr and Umar and his son and his uncle's son Ali became guardians of it. Radiyallahu anhum. O Allah, enable us to act upon this discourse. Accord us the grace of this knowledge. Let us be among those who see the truth and lead us to the best of paths. Whoever hopes to meet his Lord should do good deeds and worship none but his Lord. From the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, the last ayah. All praise is due to Allah, whose gifts are eternal, and all power belongs to Allah Most High, who begets no son, has no partner in his dominion, nor needs he any to protect him from humiliation. Ye magnify him for his greatness and glory. From Surah Al-Isra. All thanks are due to Allah, who showed the signs of his generosity and in his chosen servants, driving them to obedience and saving them from revolt, and informed us that their state is in the state of his friend sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the Holy Quran, he says, they said, we heard a noble youth, Fatah, called Ibrahim alayhi salam. Surah Al-Anbiya. He gave the title Fatah to the one he loves, because the one who bears the sign of Futuwa and is called by its name gives all the love that he had for himself, for his family, for his property and children, to Allah. He empties his being of everything and leaves it to the owner of all things. He leaves the whole universe and all that there is in it. That is when Allah calls his chosen friends. Surely they were noble youths, Fityan, who believed in their Lord, and we advanced them in guidance. They were given abundant guidance and climbed to his proximity because they believed in their Lord only for their Lord's sake, and said, our Lord is the Lord of the heaven and the earth. Never shall we call upon any God other than him. Both ayats from Surah, and the next one also from Surah Al-Kahf. Allah dressed them with his own clothes, and he took them in his high protection and turned them in the direction of his beauty, and said, and we turned them about to the right and to the left. All who enter the path of Futuwa are under Allah's direction and protection. O my son, may Allah accord you with his pleasure. You asked about Futuwa. Know that Futuwa means following the ordinances of perfection, of perfect devotion. So this is he's beginning the actual from the ayat of Quran he's quoting to the first paragraph.
Okay.
Right. So we'll just read to the first advice and pause there.
So now there aren't like stories anymore, it's just like pieces of advice.
Pieces of advice, and they're like small stories.
Okay.
Just of like, okay, so this happened, so learn from this.
Okay.
Things like that. O my son, may Allah accord you with his pleasure. You asked about Futuwa. Know that Futuwa means the following ordinances of perfect devotion. leaving all evil and attaining in action and in thought the best of visible and hidden good conduct. Every condition and every moment demand from you one aspect of futuwa. There is no state or time without that demand. There is a futuwa fit for your behavior toward God, another toward the Prophet ﷺ, and others toward his companions, radiallahu anhum, yet others toward the pure ones of the past, your shaykh, your brotherhood, and the two angels on your shoulders who keep the accounting of your deeds. I shall here describe some of these and support them by the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and the declarations, actions, conduct, and virtues of our elders. In this and all I do, I beseech the aid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who suffices me and who is the best of guardians. So the first piece of advice, we'll end with this. Bring joy into the lives of your friends and meet their needs. In a hadith that comes through us, I'm going to skip the long sanad, because he only gives the sanad for the first one, and he explains why in the other part. Because in every single account and quote and hadith, right, there's a part which is like the sanad, which is like the chain of narration, and then there's the actual text of what's being delivered, right? So in the book, they actually, at the end of the introduction, or actually before the book starts, he says that like, I've eliminated, right, the isnad, this chain of narration, because then you're reading, like, it comes through us through Abdul Rahman ibn Muhammad ibn Mahmud, through Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Yahya, through Ahmad ibn al-Azhar, right, etc., etc.
Well, I have a question. I remember like my chef, like from like my masajid, he was like teaching us like about like the meaning like of narration, like hadith or whatever. But what is that like specific book called? Because I like forgot. Or is that there's different books obviously.
Yeah. So let me just read this,
Yeah.
and then I'll answer that question. So on the authority of Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when one brings joy with his words into the life of a believer, or satisfies his worldly needs, whether small or large, it becomes an obligation upon Allah to offer him a servant on the day of last judgment. And so just putting even like a small joy into the life of a believer, right? Or satisfying one of the
another
worldly needs.
believer.
Yeah, of another. Not yourself. Not helping yourself out, right? But to help out other people. It becomes an obligation upon Allah, right? And Allah makes it obligatory upon himself, right? And Allah can do whatever he wants, so we're not saying that like, well, there's an obligation upon Allah. Allah is like favoring us, right? Is favoring that person by, offering them a servant on the day of judgment. Meaning that like, on that day, on the day of accounting, on the actual day of judgment, right? There's like before Jannah, right? That a person will get a servant, as opposed to like, you could be sitting in the shade of Allah and have a servant, as opposed to like sweating right up to your ankle or your knees, your waist, your chest, or etc., etc.
So even if you're not under like the shade of Allah, you can still have a sermon.
That I don't know. That we can find out, inshallah. But usually those people who are in the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those are the ones who are more comfortable, the ones who are... but your question about the sort of hadith, right? A hadith actually has two parts. So there's the sanad and the matan, right? So the sanad is this chain of narration, right? Going back to, you follow all the way back from the person you heard it from, the person they heard it from, the person they heard it from, right? His shaykh, his teacher, her teacher, etc., etc., going back all the way to the tabi, to Imam Bukhari, and then Imam Bukhari's like sanad back to who he heard it from, which tabi'i, which generation after the Sahaba, which Sahabi, back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? There are, I don't know, I can find it. I think there are.
Because I remember learning about it. There's like ones that are like strong, others are like weak in narration and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and
so
it was kind
that's
of
a whole
formatted in
science.
a poem. Like, I forgot.
المنظومة البيقونية أبدأ بالحمد المصليين على محمد
No, I used to do that.
Okay. You memorized?
I memorized it a long time ago. It was like in a
I memorized it a
competition.
while ago. I have to refresh my
Yeah, I
memory.
had to refresh it.
But yeah, that's all about the science of hadith.
Yeah.
Where like, yes.
I forgot it, but
But yeah, so there's different levels of authenticity.